So, perfect morning routine. If you know me, you know that I'm not going to come on here and give you some super rigid, you have to do it this way or you're going to fail, right? You know me at this point. So, what I am going to say is that there's so many ways to have a different morning routine, and I want to talk to you about a couple of ways and some of the neuroscience behind it. And when you Google like what is the perfect routine, um, you're gonna get a list of like a bunch of stuff. I'll show you an example. So it can feel overwhelming or like you're not doing it right or all kinds of stuff. So let me show you an example of. Let's see. Okay, so for example, right? It's like, can you see my screen? Okay, so it's like, okay, 21 steps for a great morning routine. Oh my gosh, I'm already overwhelmed. You're gonna tell me 21 things to do, right? And maybe again, for some of you, maybe you want a lot of things, but okay, got to get a good night's sleep. You got to avoid the snooze button. Give yourself enough time to get to work. Drink a full glass of water. Have coffee or tea. Get a healthy breakfast. Take advantage of self-care. You got to take a hot shower or bath. Put a face mask on. Read a book. Fit in a quick, get a workout, jog, do the positive affirmations, meditate, journal, prioritize, right? This is a lot, right? That's a lot. And that's normally what you see when you think of a morning routine. We also have the miracle morning, if you haven't heard of that, which is basically kind of a condensed version of that where you have like 10 or 15 minutes on each thing. And so the point of this is you really need to choose what's best for you and what's going to work for your schedule, because what works really well for one person may completely deplete you by 9 a.m. So here's here's an example. I'm going to show you an example of two different schedules here in a second from the course I wrote. But I want you to throw out the idea that your morning routine has to look a certain way, that you have to get up at a set time. If you don't get up, you got to be part of the 5 a.m. club or you're not going to be successful, or you got to do it this way. Just throw that out because that's not true. And a lot of you guys know I've coached some of the top agents in the company, and some of them doing over 4 million in GCI wake up at 8 p.m. or 8 a.m. Not 8 p.m. That would be really different, but 8 a.m. So just don't force yourself to do the things you think you should do because that's what someone said you should do in your morning routine. Your morning routine is supposed to give you energy and balance you for the day. So I'm going to do a screen share here and give you another example of what I mean by that. Okay, so here's an example. Here's two options. Let me make this a little bit bigger. Oh, it's not really working. Okay, that's big enough though. Okay, so we have Agent A, right? Agent A is 5 a.m. club. They wake up, they journal, they read for 30 minutes, they make their bed, they eat breakfast, they exercise, they do affirmations, a motivational video, they shower, they drive to the office, write note cards, social media, right? So here's their schedule. And so for some people, this might be great. For other people, and with ADHD, a lot of us can have executive function challenges, right? Getting stuff done. If we did this, and I used to do this, by 9 a.m., I was exhausted. My willpower was gone. And so great, I did this stuff that made me feel successful. But then when it came time to lead generation, I had no discipline because there was no dopamine left. I couldn't do it. And I was so tired. But I had this great morning routine, and that's what the gurus were saying to be successful. And so once I kind of, and I've seen this with a lot of people too, once you figure out what actually gives you energy for the day, what you actually like, that's when you're going to have the day you need. So we have Agent A, and some people this might work. This might work really well. So it just depends on you. So Agent B, look at this. Agent B is sleeping like a little baby when they're getting up, journaling, all that stuff. They might get up at 8 and they get a quick breakfast and a 15-minute walk in. They shower, get to the office, answer emails. And this Agent B actually might have bigger numbers because they have more willpower left to do lead generation. They haven't wasted it or used it on all this stuff they think they're supposed to do. So it really is about doing the thing that gets you ready for the day. If you're exhausted by the time you get to lead gen, if you don't have motivation, that's an issue. And if you have to do like this, crazy routine that takes like 2 or 3 hours just to be motivated to do what you're doing, that might be something to look at, because we are helping people. That's our job. And when we tie stuff to things that are interesting to us or challenge ourselves or are in an office with a lot of good synergy, you don't have to do all these crazy things to feel motivated. You get up and you're motivated, And so that's what I want to throw out there too, that it might be, if you're feeling burned out, it might be that you don't have to get out of real estate, or you don't have, it's just, you might want to do it different, or your real estate business might need to look completely different for you to not feel burned out. And you might be running a play that's not really great for you, or you're over it, Another thing with this, if we get really, really rigid, we want flexibility in this morning routine. You want to focus on kind of the core things that help, but not for a lot of us, if it's too rigid, we're going to rebel or we're going to throw it out. You ever done that? Oh man, I'm going to have this great, routine, or I'm going to do this like really big challenge, which is really cool. And once it gets to a certain point, it's not sustainable. And then because we can shift to like the all or nothing thinking, that we just drop it all together. Like if anybody's had, let's say, New Year's, where you're going to do a fitness challenge, or I'm going to get really, really in shape, and you go super extreme, and then you drop off and you're back to where you were, and instead of what's going to be sustainable, something that I'm building that I'm going to get to maintain forever. And it might not be as extreme, but over time I might lose, 1 pound every 2 weeks, which actually might be more sustainable and healthy, something like that. So that's what we're looking for, is something that it really is in alignment, and it's going to be easy for you to do, and gets you ready for the day. And so again, and the other thing I want to say too is it might vary. So sometimes, if we've heard of that word consistency, right? You got to be consistent, all that stuff. For us, that's not, consistency is going to look different. Because we've got to have flexibility. So you might have a morning routine that feels awesome. If you've ever had that, a routine, a schedule, a program, a system, it feels awesome. And one day you're just over it. Like you're just done. You might eat the same thing every morning and then you're sick of it. You might have like a special interest and then you're just kind of over it. Don't beat yourself up and like force yourself to do it day in, day in. Oh, this is the only way. I got to keep going. I've got to be consistent. The goal here is to know what your objective is, your core that you want to hit, and be flexible with how you get there. So for example, if you're in your morning routine, you have that you're exercising every single morning for 30 minutes and you're going to the gym, and then you have a couple days in a row where you'd rather, like punch yourself in the face and go to the gym, or you just can't, like you're just so unmotivated. Stop going to the gym, go walk, go ride a bike. Try something different, try a different hobby, something to get yourself movement, because the goal is not to go to the gym every day. The ultimate goal is to be healthier, right? So a lot of us too, because we've had feedback growing up that, why are you late? Why aren't you doing this right? Why did you forget? Why are you messy? How did you lose your keys? We tend to doubt ourselves, and we're very coachable, a lot of us. That's the upside to having lower self-esteem sometimes, which as a whole, with ADHD, we do. It doesn't mean you can't improve that. It's just kind of the baseline before you really work on it. And so the upside to having lower self-esteem and not trusting yourself is we can be really coachable. And just, you can find somebody and say, okay, I'm going to follow every single thing you tell me to do because I don't trust myself. Well, if you choose the right person, you can grow very, very fast. Very fast. Now, the downside, though, is that we can be so coachable that we can follow something that's not actually for us and not have discernment to say, ooh, that doesn't work for me. There must be something wrong with me. I'm not disciplined enough. I'm not focused enough. I'm not, I'm immature, whatever. And so you want to watch that. That's really important. And so it's okay to have flex with stuff. It's actually really good, because when we talk about the 5 things that light up an ADHD brain, which is the acronym INCUP, which is INCUP, interesting, new, challenging, urgent, and passion, right? Interesting, new, challenging, urgent, and passion. When your morning routine is not interesting anymore, it's not new, it's not challenging, maybe it's not urgent, right? And it's not part of your passion, there's not going to be dopamine flowing. It's going to be way harder to do that. So don't beat yourself up, make it new, switch it up, wake up at a different time when you hit a wall. Have a different challenge, have a different type of movement. You have full permission to not be consistent with how you do it. Just be consistent with whatever your objective is and make that clear and let it be loose. So again, if it's health, if it's fitness, if it's sleep, if it's calming yourself down, whatever that is, feel free to play with that. Just don't change whatever that ultimate goal at the end is. So that being said, I want to talk to you about phones in the morning and our dopamine levels. Because if you've been on these calls before, you know that our dopamine regulation is different than someone who doesn't have ADHD. And so we might get no dopamine when we need dopamine, or we might get too much when we don't need as much. It might come flooding out. And dopamine is that chemical that makes us feel happy and calm and motivated and execute on tasks and do what we're supposed to do and discipline and all that stuff. And so really, I had a coaching call last week where this woman kept saying, I gotta get motivated. I'm trying to do this to get motivated. I said, hold on, switch the word motivated with the word dopamine and say it again. And it was, oh my gosh, I need dopamine. That's what it is. That's what motivation is. Because I'll show you kind of how dopamine shows up in the brain. So really, with ADHD as a whole, we're regulating our dopamine. We're figuring out what works for us. That's really like the hack. If we look at behind everything we're doing on all these calls, a lot of it's about regulating our dopamine, because that's the gas that makes us go. That's really what it is. So if you haven't done stuff, if you haven't been disciplined, whatever, it's not you, it's dopamine. Like, you don't have dopamine and you don't have as much as someone else. So it's not fair to compare. So I want to talk about, in the morning, there are two things that I would suggest, and you can see about 98% of people are going to benefit from. So your morning routine can look like anything. If you just did this one thing, it can change a lot of stuff. So our phones, we have this tiny little computer that is a dopamine machine, right? It just gives us, we can pick it up and it gives us dopamine when we need it to. And that can be good. And it can also be something we get really drawn to. And so what I want you to think about is, like, this is a water control gate. And there's two things I want you to do before turning on your phone in the morning. And again, I left 2% because if you need it to regulate, if you need to feel safe, if there's certain times where it really does benefit you, it's okay to break the rules. This is something to practice and kind of play with. It doesn't mean this is the absolute and you're wrong if you're doing a different way. It just means most people are going to benefit from this. So this is a water control gate. And what I want you to think about is, behind this gate is all of our dopamine for the day. This is our dopamine. It's behind this gate. And this gate is the thing that kind of opens and gives us dopamine when we need it in our brain, or it regulates the flow of it. And so we're on the front here. Our brain's on the front receiving the dopamine. The dopamine's back here. And so when you pick up your phone, what they've shown, because it produces so much dopamine, is that it can just open up the floodgates and you get most of your dopamine for the day right then. Right? That's the scroll. When we just it keeps giving us dopamine, it keeps producing dopamine and kind of releasing it. So it can almost be addictive. That's why our phones are addictive. And it's especially important for us because we're generally at a lower dopamine level than the average population. We're starving for it. We need it. So when you pick up your phone right away, what happens is you're just opening the floodgates and you're getting all that dopamine that you actually need to be regulated throughout the day. You need that. Now, if you do two things before you get that dopamine, it's going to set you up really, really well. So those two things are at least 15 minutes of movement and some kind of breakfast, unless you're fasting. So if you're fasting, maybe, play with what that could be. But the reason I say exercise is because our brains, when we look at brain scans, our brains with ADHD don't light up as strong or as long in certain areas as our non-ADHD, other people, right? They don't, our friends, our family, whoever, they light up more consistently and stay on longer, except if it hits INCUP, right? Those 5 things: interesting, new, challenging, urgent, and passion. So our brains don't light up as strong. Now, exercise, however, it targets the part of the brain that doesn't light up as much, and regulates dopamine. And by doing 15 minutes of movement, and we can talk about what that is, just 15 minutes of movement, what you're doing is you're lighting up that center of the brain that produces dopamine and regulates it for majority of the day. Have you ever had that where, like, you feel so much better after exercise or movement? You just go for a walk and you're like, oh my gosh, I was so in my head, right? Totally me. What that's doing is it's actually helping with your emotion regulation. So when you flood all the dopamine comes out before you get some kind of movement. It could be like stretching. You could just, if you can't get up, you don't have to go to the gym and do some crazy workout. literally just flop on the floor and stretch for 15 minutes, and do some push-ups or some sit-ups, or just do yoga, something. Go for a gentle walk. You don't have to have some extreme thing, or go out there and do a HIIT workout and just kill it. We want to light up that part of our brain that's going to regulate dopamine, because that is what's regulating everything we're doing throughout the day. And so when you open up your phone, it's like that. Oh, here's all the dopamine. Oh my gosh, this is great. So if you look at your phone and the dopamine floods in and you get that, it's kind of like you're not going to have dopamine to go work out sometimes, or to do the other things, because you kind of already got a lot of your dopamine. The brain's like, hey, we got our dopamine, and there's not a lot left. So we're just going to lay here and feel guilty and shameful now and keep going on our phone for little bits of dopamine. That's what can happen for some people. And I want to show you another thing about dopamine here. And so this is another way to look at it. So this is the brain, and the blue is the path of the dopamine. So what happens, and this is when, I did a call, I think last year, on the science of motivation. What happens is right here, there's signals, whether it's a stimulus, whether it's an internal or an external stimulus that says, hey, we need to do something. So an external stimulus could be anything. It could be like, hey, maybe it's your spouse. It's like, hey, we need more money. We got to pay the bills. I need you to really work and get more sales. Or it could be internal, where you're like, hey, I want to be in the top in the office. This is motivating. I want to prove to myself, So there's some kind of stimulus, whatever that is, that occurs. And then what happens is the brain says, ooh, here's a stimulus. We need to be motivated. And the brain sends dopamine through these blue arrows. And then you get a surplus in the frontal lobe. So once there's a surplus in the frontal lobe, the brain says, okay. And the frontal lobe, by the way, is responsible for doing things and taking action, right? So once there's a surplus, then the brain has enough fuel or gas to then execute on things. And when we already with ADHD, unless it's one of those 5 things, we don't get as much of a surplus. We have just a little bit. And sometimes it's on a delay. So who here is, once I get started, then I'm good. But I have to get started first. Then, okay. So think of it like this gate. This gate is kind of finicky with us. So someone without ADHD, the gate's like, oh, you need some dopamine? Here, let me open up till about here and we'll give you what you need. Great. Okay, now we close it. Oh, you need a little bit more here. Ours is like, open, close, open, close. Nope, not closing now. Nope, not opening. Nope, you can't have any dopamine. Good luck. Just sit on the couch and, feel crappy. And other people, it looks like you're resting, but you're really beating yourself up and you're exhausted after 4 hours, but you haven't done anything. You see them put the laundry in, right? So this gate is kind of finicky, depending on the situation. And so that's what can happen if you're on your phone and scrolling before you get up, and we've got the stress hormones. I mean, you're getting texts from people. Oh, I forgot to do this. I forgot to do this. Oh man, I didn't do this. What you're doing is you're really revving up your nervous system. So ideally, what happens is if you can have your phone off, and again, this is different. Some people, one situation is trauma. You really need to have a phone close to you to feel safe. Then throw some of the stuff I'm saying out, right? If it doesn't work for you, if it gives you anxiety, this is meant to help you. So this is, anyone that says you have to do it this way or you're not going to succeed, that is a red flag. So I want to throw that caveat out there. Ideally, if you don't have that, you would have your phone off or on airplane mode, and it would be plugged in somewhere where you can't reach it from bed. You have to get up to get it. That is going to be one of the keys here. We don't want to rely solely on discipline. It's not fair. So ideally you want to make it like a little bit harder. You want to put steps ahead, because we do have that executive function issue where it's hard to execute on stuff. So use it against you in a good way. Make things that you don't want to do harder and have extra steps. And the things you do want to do, make sure that there's as few steps as possible so it's easy to do. So, I mean, some of you guys know, for example, on my Wi-Fi, I have a Christmas light timer, because instead of relying on discipline to stop watching Netflix or whatever, my Christmas light timer goes off at 10 p.m. and it cuts off the internet. And then sometimes when I've had a really hard time, I put a piece of duct tape over it so I can't move it. So if I really want to keep watching that show, I have to get up. If I'm all comfortable on the couch, by that point, I'm like, I'll go to bed, right? And then I have to walk over and I have to then make the decision to pull off the duct tape and then switch the switch or unplug it and redo it and then wait for the Wi-Fi to boost. So chances are I'm probably not going to keep watching that show, or whatever I was doing, because I'm putting steps in front of things because I know I have executive function issues. And then vice versa, if I want to make things easy, I'm going to remove as many steps as I can. So having the phone where it's not within reach is going to be very helpful. And then if you have it off, the reason for that is you have to turn it on and you have to wait for it to turn on. You can't just flip it up and boom, you're going. So that is going to be for a lot of people. And then food. So if you're not fasting in the morning, low blood sugar can mimic ADHD symptoms. And when things are urgent, we're drawn to them, right? So if you turn on your phone and, oh my gosh, I forgot to call this person back. There's this closing, boom, boom. I'm going, oh my gosh, I forgot to eat. It's 11. Man, I got a little bit of brain fog, or I'm a little panicky or whatever. So that's why eating something is very helpful, because it's going to balance your blood sugar out. And if you're neurodivergent, especially if you're on the autism spectrum, they've shown that we can have blood sugar stuff. Like there can be a little bit in variation and have a little bit more issues with it. And so being able to have something like high fiber, something nutritious, healthy protein, some kind of healthy fat is going to be very helpful for you, especially because we hyperfocus. So if you get at least one good meal in the morning and then you forget what time it is and it's 6 p.m. at night, at least you had one decent meal versus, oh my gosh, I haven't eaten all day, I feel terrible, So that's why if you just do those two things. So, why I say that is, yes, you could go to a schedule that's more rigid like this. But if you just have two things, that might be more sustainable, that you just kind of get in the pattern where you go out for a walk. Nature is really helpful with ADHD. It can actually engage that part of the brain. And so think of if every day you wake up and you're also rewiring your dopamine. So dopamine can be addictive. Dopamine is a chemical. There are drugs that what they do is they open that gate and they flow dopamine in, synthetic dopamine, and they make your brain produce it, and they can be very addictive. So little things, obviously it's not the same level, but because phones can produce dopamine, they can be addictive too, And so and it's just our jobs. Social media is a great way to get leads. So if you can just take that pause in the morning and not turn your phone on, and you might even go get some magazines or some books that are really fun for you to read if you have trouble getting up, but you want something stimulating. I have a little radio, like a battery powered radio you can bring around with you. So if you want music on, because again, listening to music on your phone, it's very easy to, oh, I got a text, oh, what's that? Oh man, oh shoot, that email just came through. And then we're gone because remember, the urgency part creates dopamine. And we're going to be drawn to urgency, even if it's not the right thing. Have you ever had that where you have a to-do list and other things are more important, but something feels urgent, even if it's not that important, you can go to it first? It's normal, because it's our brain says, when we go back to this chart, our brain says, oh, here's this urgent thing. Oh, here's all the dopamine to do it. Oh, here's this important thing. You can have a little bit, So why it's just really important to understand this, because it takes away the shame. We're just playing like and helping the chemicals and kind of getting where things are at. Because again, if you're doing a routine like this and it's not helpful for you, and then you're relying on willpower or forcing yourself, you're on a one-way trip to burnout city. That's what this is. So if you've done all this stuff, you know all the right stuff, and you're burned out, you need to pull it back and just get the basics, and then do that. So another thing, speaking of, where did my notes go? So speaking of breakfast, you do not have to cook some huge breakfast like they have in the movies. Make stuff easy for you. Make it as easy as possible. So your breakfast could be toast with almond butter and honey. It could be a smoothie. It could be, you could buy like the smoothies that they have, or the protein shakes, and you have that, on a granola bar. Just get something, and just make it as easy as possible as you can. Let me see. Yeah. So just cut out steps, cut out steps. And again, if you hit a wall on what your plan is, switch it up. Do some kind of movement instead. Okay, let me see. Oh, and then there's I want to talk about affirmations a little bit, because there's some stuff that people say to do every morning, and I want to give you a couple options. So when people say affirmations, the thing with us with ADHD or neurodivergence, we can take things literally and we can take things to the extreme. So when someone says affirmations, we can picture I've got to be, super revved up and stimulated and saying in the mirror and doing an action with it. And, I've got to say I'm the greatest salesperson in the world, that kind of stuff. That does not have to be what your affirmations look like. For me, that can actually be very overstimulating, and I don't believe it. I'm not the best salesperson in the world. I'm a good salesperson, but I'm not the best. So it's got to feel authentic to me. So it's okay to soften that and say something like, every day I'm getting better, or I really like the growth I'm having, or I believe in myself. I mean, think of it more, instead of some big thing, it's you're adding a couple extra like affirming thoughts in your brain, versus some big thing that you're trying to convince yourself something. So is this making sense? Does anybody else feel like the affirmations? Because I used to think it had to be this big thing, and you got to think you're the absolute best. And I take things literally into the extreme. So again, it can be more of just intentional with how you speak to yourself, or even like, what is the story you're telling yourself about that day, and being aware of that. Are you telling yourself, man, like real estate market's hard? I'm having, it's hard getting this or whatever. Are you saying, okay, it might be hard and I can do it. I believe in myself. So if you do affirmations, they can look like anything. The goal is for you to help add a little bit more positive things in your day, and just add those to your thoughts. And just kind of affirm yourself, because we need that, especially with all the stuff we got told growing up. So the next thing, gratitude. So making a gratitude list. um, you know you can make a list of all the things you're super grateful for, and get emotional about it. You could also, you don't even need to make a list. You could also look around and just notice things that you like, or things that make you happy, or, oh, this bed is really soft, this covers, or I'm really, proud of myself for walking. It's just little things, because with anyone, this is not just with ADHD, the majority of our thoughts are negative. They've shown that in studies. They're just negative. That's how they are. It's actually can be our biology, because then we can predict what's going to go wrong and we can protect ourselves, right? Anxiety is this thing that we've developed actually for survival, because we get anxious if we hear, like if there's a bear that comes in, and and then the next time when we go in that area, we're going to think, where's the bear? We're going to be alert for it. We're going to be hyper vigilant. So anxiety in a way has actually protected us. It just kind of gets into a habit. And so by just throwing in little nice, happy things, or things that you notice, you can start to rewire, because our brain is plastic. I mean, the neuroplasticity can actually change. So just noticing little things versus it being this grand extreme gesture, and you've got to make a list. You don't have to list anything. You don't have to say affirmations out loud. You could say them in your head. You could point out stuff, gratitude on your walk. You don't have to make a list. You don't have to do it a certain way. You can do it anyway. You could just think it, not even say it out loud. So, if you want to integrate that, it can be helpful. Some people do a cold shower. That can increase dopamine. You don't have to, though, because that's a sensory nightmare for some of us. Like, who wants to get out of bed and have a cold shower? So it just completely depends. And I think the main thing is that play with your schedule and figure out, how do I want to feel when I start my day, at 8 or 9 or 10 or whenever you start your day. And what are the things that would help me get to that place by that time? And it could be sleeping in, and it could be stretching on the floor and having a protein shake that was already in the fridge that you bought, the prepackaged ones, and you're done in about 10, 15 minutes, and that's it. So again, it just depends. Or it could be a bunch of stuff. So that is my content for the day. Okay. All right. Well, have a wonderful rest of your day, and we'll talk to you next time. All right. Bye, everybody.